The NFL in 2025 is an offensive game. I don't think that's much of a hot take. A majority of the top 10 players in the NFL that you will see named on a regular basis are offensive players. Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey, Jameis Winston, all-time great offensive players. You could go all day and all night. But the real question is, who is the greatest offensive player of all time? In a league where it's so offensively prioritized, could the greatest offensive player of all time be from generations before where defense reigned supreme? Well, I'm going to answer that for you. First off, y'all need a like, y'all need a comment, and y'all need to subscribe. And if you don't,
I pray to God you go to jail on a RICO charge one of your friends committed, and for 365 days, 10 years straight, you proceed to get anally raped.
Alright, let's hop into the video. And for the record, if I don't know the players, I'm probably going to pick the other players. Like with 1950s, 1940s, 1960s football, I'm not too up to date about it, or back to date, should I say. But with that being said, let's get into it. Roger Craig or Bob Brown. I'm more familiar with Roger Craig because he had a 1,000-yard season, the first player in NFL history to ever do so. So I'm going to go as an offensive player. Roger Craig's better than Bob Brown. It might be Bob Brown, but to the 5 Bob Brown fans out there, please correct me. And not to mention, what is this stance that all old offensive linemen did back then? Anywho, Roger Craig. Steve McNair or Ralph Neely? Steve McNair. He has an MVP. Larry Fitzgerald or Mike Munchak? I'm going to go with Larry Fitzgerald. I have him in my top 5 wide receivers of all time. He's top 5 in every major stat, and he has the greatest hands in NFL history, and he's one of the greatest playoff performers of all time. Shout out Larry Fitzgerald. Marcus Allen or Quentin Nelson? Quentin Nelson is a great offensive guard, a little overrated than what he used to be, but Marcus Allen might be the most overrated running back of all time. Let me show you guys. We all know Marcus Allen as this NFL legend, but Christ, is he a longevity merchant. Marcus Allen, one of the greatest running backs of all time, at least they try to tell you. First year, 697, 11 touchdowns, that's pretty good. And then in 1983, 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, 1,168 yards, 13 touchdowns. And then his best season of his career in 1985, 1,759 yards, 11 touchdowns, 1 league MVP. But from this point forward, 86, he didn't have 1,000 yards. 87, he didn't have 1,000 yards. 88, no. 89, no. 90, no. 91, no. 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, all the way to 97. So in this man's 16-year career, he had 3 1,000-yard seasons. There were running backs before him that played in the 60s, 50s, and 70s that had more 1,000-yard rushing seasons. But with that being said, I have to go with Marcus Allen because he's still a Hall of Famer. He's still a league MVP, has one of the greatest runs of all time, and he's still like a top 25 running back ever. Randy Moss or Wes Welker, this isn't close. He's the 3rd greatest wide receiver of all time, in my opinion. He calls himself the GOAT when it's obviously he's not the GOAT wide receiver. It's obviously Jerry Rice. Wes Welker is a great slot receiver, but this one's not too close. Randy Moss. Jamar Chase or Keenan Allen? Keenan Allen has better all-time stats, but Jamar Chase's peak is already just so much better than Keenan Allen, and he's already such a better player than Keenan Allen ever was, winning the Triple Crown, something Keenan Allen hasn't even came close to. It's going to be Jamar Chase. Todd Gurley or Mel Hine? I've heard of Mel Hine, so we're actually going to give this dude a look. 1931, 1945. That might disqualify him off rip. I ain't even going. 5 first-team All-Pros as a center. 1931 to 1945 was segregated in NFL, and Todd Gurley as an offensive player is just so much better, if we're being honest, especially in his prime. Mike Webster or Jordy Nelson? As a Kansas State fan, we love ourselves some Jordy Nelson, but Mike Webster might be the 2nd greatest center of all time. 5-time first-team All-Pro, and he's in the NFL Hall of Fame. We're going to go Mike Webster, but love ourselves some Jordy Nelson. Norm Van Brocklin or Rayfield Wright? I know Norm Van Brocklin, so we're going with them. 2 unks right here. Shout out to the 20 Norm Van Brocklin and Rayfield Wright fans. Anquan Boldin or Gene Higgerson? I don't really know too much about Gene Higgerson, if I'm being honest, and as you see, this says 256, so there's going to be a lot of players I just genuinely don't know. So we're going to go with Anquan Boldin. He has one of the greatest rookie wide receiver years of all time, if not the greatest. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He has 1,000 receptions. It's not too close for me. Maybe this dude's a secret all-time great, but Anquan Boldin. Ron Yary or Odell Beckham Jr.? See, he had a short peak and a short career and a short prime, so I'm actually going to look at Ron Yary. He made 6 first-team All-Pros, all in the 70s, so it's a pretty relevant era at right tackle. I think I'm going to go with Ron Yary over OBJ just because how short his peak and prime was, and he played longer. So Ron Yary. Jerry Evans or Devontae Adams? Devontae Adams is one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. You could argue he's a top 15 wide receiver of all time. He constantly puts up numbers no matter what team he's on, so I'm going Devontae Adams. Jim Taylor or Anthony Munoz? Jim Taylor, underrated. He has an MVP. He was probably the best player on those early Green Bay teams that actually three-peated, the only team in NFL history to really three-peat. But Anthony Munoz has like 10 first-team All-Pros, and he's the greatest offensive lineman ever. So we're going Anthony Munoz. Sterling Sharp or Dick Stanfel? What was with niggas in the 1950s naming their kids Dick? And of course he's an offensive lineman, so he's hitting this shit. But Sterling Sharp, NFL Hall of Famer. He's the number 2 wide receiver behind Jerry Rice for most of the 90s until his career was sadly cut short. But we're going Sterling Sharp. Matthew Stafford or Andrew Whitworth? Andrew Whitworth was one of the best tackles of the 2010s. He was one of the only good things in Cincinnati, but Matthew Stafford on the Detroit Lions, he put up some amazing stats, throwing 5,000 yards on the Detroit Lions, constant 30-plus touchdown season. He's considered a top 5 quarterback in the league right now as it stands, and he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer at quarterback, and he won a Super Bowl as the best player on that team. So, actually, you could argue Cooper Kupp's better. I'd probably say Cooper Kupp's better, but he was one of the 2 best players on that team. Actually, you could argue Aaron Donald was better, but it doesn't matter. Matthew Stafford. Bobby Mitchell or Roy Green? I know a little bit about Bobby Mitchell. He had a few 1,000-yard seasons in, I think, the 50s and 60s, but Roy Green, I am not too familiar on him. He had 2 very good years in the middle of his career, but I'm leaning towards Bobby Mitchell. Ray Rice or Charlie Sanders? Charlie Sanders never had above 800 yards receiving. Ray Rice had multiple 1,000-yard years, and he beat his wife. Ray Rice. Fran Tarkenton or Zach Ertz? Fran Tarkenton basically retired with every quarterback record there is to be known. Zach Ertz, while he was a good to great tight end, he was never literally the best tight end or a top 3 tight end in the league. You could argue, I think it was 2018 when he had his only 1,000-yard season he was. But Fran Tarkenton's severely underrated. He has 300 passing touchdowns. He was the first to ever do it, and he's one of the most dynamic quarterbacks of all time. I believe he'd be better in this era, but Fran Tarkenton. And this is just a bad draw for Jason Witten because Antonio Brown is one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. He's more dominant at receiving than Jason Witten, while Jason Witten was a good blocker. That doesn't make up for the receiving difference between Antonio Brown and Jason Witten, so we're going with CTE Man. Now we got the Rapist or Ozzie Newsome. While I don't like the Rapist, he is one of the 20 greatest quarterbacks of all time. He won 2 Super Bowls and he was great throughout the majority of the 2010s and late 2000s, so we're going with the Rapist here. Patrick Mahomes or Jerry Kramer? This isn't particularly close. It's Patrick Mahomes. Art Monk or Stephon Diggs? Art Monk has 12,000 yards, but Stephon Diggs, I believe, is the better wide receiver. He's underrated when it comes to all-time wide receiver debates. I got him in top 22 all-time. I'd probably have him at number 20. He was really the only receiving threat Josh Allen has really gotten up to this point in his career, and I'm really choosing Stephon Diggs here. He might not have better career stats, but I believe at his peak, he was just a better receiver, and he's more skillful at the position than Art Monk. Shout out Art Monk, though. Lamar Jackson or Bob Hayes? This goes without a question, Lamar Jackson. John Mackey or Ken Anderson? John Mackey's one of the greatest tight ends of all time. I believe Ken Anderson won an MVP. But due to the MVP, and I believe he took the Bengals to the Super Bowl one year against the 49ers, I'm going Ken Anderson. Eddie George or John Elway? John Elway has a slappable face. Like, really. He looks like a fucking mule. Even though I think John Elway is extremely overrated. Some people have him in top 5 quarterback debates. He doesn't belong there. He won an MVP throwing 19 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. But John Elway is the better player. 2-time Super Bowl champion, 1-time Super Bowl MVP, and he has a league MVP some fucking how. Eddie George never got there, and he averaged under 4 yards per carry in multiple 1,000-yard seasons. John Elway. Lenny Moore or Justin Jefferson? Justin Jefferson's prime so far is one of the 5 greatest peaks a wide receiver has ever had. He is on track to be the greatest wide receiver of all time, and I'm not even joking, and it's crazy. Because I really don't think any wide receiver outside of Justin Jefferson has ever been on track to beat Jerry Rice, but Justin Jefferson is. So with that being said, Jay Jett is. Jackie Smith or Raymond Berry? We're going Raymond Berry. Sid Luckman or Alex Mack? For his era, Sid Luckman was a really good quarterback. I know I said I wouldn't be valuing 1930s, 1940s football, but Sid Luckman compared to Alex Mack, yeah, he's a great quarterback. I believe he won an MVP. I believe he has multiple first-team All-Pros. Probably the best quarterback of his era, arguably, so we're going Sid Luckman. And I believe he has an NFL championship. Sammy Baugh or Steve Young? Sammy Baugh was probably the best quarterback of his era, him and Sid Luckman. But Steve Young is probably the most underrated quarterback of all time. Because I see people put Eli Manning over him, Ben Roethlisberger over him. It doesn't make sense because simply put, the impact Steve Young had is 10 times more than Ben Roethlisberger or Eli Manning. Steve Young has 2 MVPs. If you adjust those MVP seasons for era, one season he's throwing 40-plus touchdown passes, one season he's throwing 50-plus touchdown passes. Hell, in his best year in 1998 where he didn't win MVP, he threw 38 touchdown passes in 1998. That is era adjusted to 45-plus touchdown passes. He's one of the most dynamic quarterbacks of all time, ending his career with the most rushing touchdowns by a quarterback that stood until literally Cam Newton came into the league. 2 first-team All-Pros and won a Super Bowl and has the greatest Super Bowl performance of all time, throwing 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He showed up in all the big moments, and he showed up in the regular season. Steve Young. Jamal Charles or Joe Perry? Jamal Charles. This really isn't a question. I don't know who the fuck Joe Perry is. Why'd they just give him like AI names back in the 30s and 40s? I don't know. Jamal Charles. Alan Faneca or Chris Carter? Chris Carter's one of the 10 greatest wide receivers of all time. Second greatest hands of all time. I have him after Larry Fitzgerald. He's top 10 in receiving touchdowns, I believe, and receiving yards. Chris Carter. Steve Van Buren or Steve Largent? Steve Largent is basically the Jerry Rice / Don Hudson of his time. He retired with every receiving record, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. He's still probably one of the 15 greatest wide receivers of all time. He dominated his era like no other up to that point besides Don Hudson and Jerry Rice, so we're going Steve Largent. Jamal Lewis or Forrest Gregg? I do know who Forrest Gregg is. I'm pretty sure he made a fuck ton of All-Pro teams. Yeah, he made, 7-time first-team All-Pro. We're going Forrest Gregg. John Stallworth or Priest Holmes? This is actually really good because Priest Holmes' prime is so fucking great. I don't believe he won NFL MVP, but he broke the rushing yards record. Oh, my bad, the rushing touchdowns record in a season. And he had back-to-back 20-plus rushing touchdown seasons in a row. But John Stallworth is probably the best receiver of his time. Him and Lance Allworth. With that being said, Priest Holmes definitely dominated his era at his position a little bit better, and running back position in the 2000s had a lot of competition. The fact he was the best running back for multiple seasons in the early 2000s says something, so we're going Priest Holmes. Maurice Jones-Drew, Cam Newton. I know Maurice Jones-Drew led the league in rushing one year. He's probably the greatest high school player of all time when it comes to football, but Cam Newton, 2015 league MVP. He led a terrible Carolina offense to the #1 offense in the league and to the Super Bowl. He has the most rushing touchdowns by a quarterback to this day. It's not too close for me out of these two. I'm going Cam Newton. Tony Romo or Jim Ringo? I've heard of Jim Ringo. Let me look up Jim Ringo because I don't want to throw Tony Romo up there when he's really not all that great. He's not really close to a Hall of Famer. 6-time first-team All-Pro. We're going Jim Ringo. I'm sorry. Dave Casper or Julio Jones? This isn't close. I believe he still has the record for most yards per game. A top 10 wide receiver all time. Probably the greatest jump ball getters in NFL history. Him and Megatron. You can flip them, but Julio. Reggie Wayne or Nate Newton? He's one of the 15 greatest receivers of all time. Reggie Wayne. Jim Brown or Fred Taylor? Jim Brown's stats are ridiculous. He won MVP as a rookie. Enough said. Don't know any of them. Isaac Bruce or Dwight Clark? Dwight Clark, this is the pinnacle of his career right here. This catches. Isaac Bruce has like 15,000 receiving yards. He's one of the only 3 wide receivers to have that. I believe it's like him, Terrell, and Jerry that have that much receiving yards. So we're going Isaac Bruce. Bart Starr or Kellen Winslow Sr.? This is actually pretty hard. I think Bart Starr's kind of slightly overrated. I think this dude has a criminal fucking kid. I'm going Kellen Winslow, especially when you consider Johnny Unitas was in that era and he was throwing 33 passing touchdowns. Ricky Watters or Jimbo Cover? Jimbo Cover is in the Hall of Fame, I believe. He played very short career. It was like 10 seasons maybe, but from what I've heard of him, I think I'm going to pick him. Ricky Watters was also very great for my 49ers, and he played for the Seattle Seahawks, but because he played for the Seahawks, we're going Jimbo. Donovan McNabb or Amon Green? Donovan McNabb is probably the greatest Eagles quarterback of all time. Some of the things he did was just electric on the field. But Amon Green's definitely the greatest running back in Green Bay Packers history. Yeah, I'm going Amon Green here. Sorry, Eagles fans. That might be a hot take. Julian Edelman or Marquise Pouncey? Julian Edelman, you're overrated as shit, and if you think he's a Hall of Famer...
I pray to God, your girlfriend catches chlamydia and doesn't tell you, so the next time you guys have sex, you get chlamydia.
But Marquise Pouncey. Curtis Martin or Bruce Matthews? Bruce Matthews, one of the greatest offensive linemen of all time, but he's also one of the greatest running backs of all time. Very underrated running back. He's kind of like Barry Sanders, maybe a little less, but honestly, his talent is there to argue he is kind of like Barry Sanders. I believe he has 12,000 plus yards in only 10 seasons. Let me make sure Curtis Martin was really like that. 90 touchdowns in what, 10 years? And he's in the Hall of Fame. I really don't know. I'm going to go with Bruce Matthews just because I know he's a Hall of Fame offensive lineman and considered one of the greatest of all time. Curtis Martin, you're one of the greatest offensive players of all time. This is just a shitty draw for you. Kenny Stabler or Marvin Harrison? Kenny Stabler was a good quarterback. Marvin Harrison was an elite wide receiver and one of the 5 greatest of all time, arguably. Troy Aikman or Dak Prescott? Troy Aikman, like the most overrated quarterback of all time. I heard someone call the 90s the Troy Aikman era. No, he threw over 20 touchdowns once. If I'm taking a quarterback, I'm taking Dak. I don't care. If I'm taking a quarterback of those two, I'm taking Dak Prescott. Jason Pierce, Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's a top 15 quarterback ever. Jason Pierce, one of the greatest left tackles of all time, but I'm taking Russell Wilson. Jackie Slater, Jason Kelsey, one of the greatest offensive linemen of all time, the greatest center of all time. He made like 7 first-team All-Pros. It's really not fair here. And did you know his brother's dating Taylor Swift? DeAndre Hopkins or Edgerrin James? This is a goofy one because who even compares these two? Because DeAndre Hopkins has ridiculous stats and Edgerrin James has ridiculous stats. I value a wide receiver a little more, and the fact that DeAndre Hopkins is still doing it, I believe he has the longevity edge over him. I'm going to take DeAndre Hopkins, and at least DeAndre Hopkins, I believe, for some years was considered the best wideout out in the league. Yes, the running back position was very overpopulated in the 2000s, but I think it says something for being the best wide receiver in the 2010s because there was also elite receivers back then. But yeah, I'm picking DeAndre Hopkins. Marshawn Lynch or Jeff Saturday. This also has to be illegal to compare because Marshawn Lynch has like 10,000 yards rushing, but Jeff Saturday really has only 2 first-team All-Pros. Eeny, meeny, money, mo. Eeny, meeny, money, mo. I'm picking Marshawn Lynch. Marion Montley, Andre Reed. Shout out Marion Montley, but Andre Reed, I believe, just has better counting stats, even though you played in the 40s. So that's really the reason you don't have the counting stats, but I'm going Andre Reed here. Phillip Rivers or Randall Cunningham. You see, this is the more talented quarterback, right? When it comes to counting stats, when it comes to what they did in their career. I would argue Randall Cunningham's peak is a little better, but longevity says a lot, and his peak wasn't too far off from Randall Cunningham, so I'm going Phillip Rivers. Tom Mack or Will Shields? Will Shields. Jalen Hurts or Randall McDaniel? I believe Randall McDaniel made a shit ton of first-team All-Pros compared to Jalen Hurts having none and just having a second-team All-Pro, so I'm going Randall McDaniel. Johnny Unitas or Travis Kelce? I love Travis Kelce. I'm in the minority here. And did you know he's dating Taylor Swift? But anywho, Johnny Unitas is one of the 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time still. He threw 33 touchdowns in the 1950s, which error-adjusted is like fucking 70 touchdown passes. And he had a positive touchdown interception ratio. He has 3 MVPs, I believe, maybe even 4. And for a while, he was literally the Tom Brady of the NFL. Literally until Joe Montana came almost 30 years later, he was the Tom Brady of the NFL. So we're going to Johnny U. Len Dawson or Larry Little? Len Dawson, I believe he won Super Bowl MVP. He led the AFL in passing yards like something silly like 5 times. But Larry Little has a bunch of first-team All-Pros. Len Dawson's one of the greatest quarterbacks in Chiefs history. He led them to their first Super Bowl. Well, I'm going to take Len Dawson because quarterback bias and the fact that he was putting up insane stats for his era. I didn't even realize that. Shout out Len Dawson. Doak Walker, Marshall Yonda. This looks like the 1910s. Brett Favre or Torrey Holt. Brett Favre is one of the 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time. Torrey Holt, you could argue, is one of the 15 greatest wide receivers of all time, but I basically said it right there, you know. Logan Mankins or Rob Gronkowski. Rob Gronkowski is arguably the greatest tight end ever. Mike Evans or Marshall Faulk. Mike Evans has a bunch of fraudulent ass 1,000-yard seasons. Yes, having 1,000 yards is great. It's not like he's having 1,300 yards, 1,400, 1,500 yards. No, it's like 1,000, 1,100, 1,005 yards. Marshall Faulk had 1,000 in a season. He won a league MVP. It's Marshall Faulk. Joe Montana or Tyreek Hill. Joe Montana has the greatest playoff run of all time. He won 4 Super Bowls. I believe he has 2 or 3 Super Bowl MVPs, 2 league MVPs. In 1 year, he swept the awards, literally having MVP Offensive Player of the Year and Super Bowl MVP. It's not really too close. It's Joe Montana. Kurt Warner or TQ Barber. Impact-wise, it's Kurt Warner. He led his team to a Super Bowl, having one of the greatest quarterback seasons of all time. And offensively impactful, it's really not close because he went to 3 Super Bowls throughout his career. He's a pretty good playoff performer as well, Kurt Warner. Y.A. Tittle, shout out 49ers legend, or Billy Shaw. I know Y.A. Tittle, and I'm biased because he's a 49ers legend. And this pick, this dude looks like he's from Mad. He looks like Frankenstein. This dude's chopped to shit. Y.A. Tittle. Jim Kelly or Hines Ward. Love me some Hines Ward, but Jim Kelly's in the Hall of Fame. He went to 4 straight Super Bowls, leading the Buffalo Bills to them. Hold on, let me check Hines Ward's stats. I know they're pretty good, but let me just make fucking sure. 12,000 yards, 85 touchdowns. That's pretty good. Pretty good. Your heads, your tails. Flip a coin, Siri. It's heads, Jim Kelly. George Kittle or Dan Deerdorf. So we're going George Kittle, one of the 10 greatest tight ends ever. Hugh McElhenney, Hugh Henney, or Don Hudson. I got a bunch of shit for not putting Don Hudson in my top 10 wide receivers, and I'm going to make up for it. But first off, what I want to say is, this dude played during World War II, where most of the league was in World War II, right? And he played in a segregated NFL. That's like 70% of the fucking league gone, so of course he dominated. It's easy to look like you're the Jerry Rice of your era when there's not a single black man guarding you, and Cooper DeGenis fighting over in Normandy. Don Hudson. Bob Greasy or Jerome Bettis. Bob Greasy had a few good seasons with the bus. I believe he's still top 10 all time in rushing. Got a few first team All-Pros. He has, I believe, above 100 rushing touchdowns. I'm going to go Jerome Bettis. Autogram or Joe. Okay, we're going Autogram. Steven Jackson or Herschel Walker. Steven Jackson, I believe he has the most rushing yards in Ram history, and they have Eric Dickerson and Marshall Faulk. Herschel Walker had a few good years, but he really started the Cowboys dynasty, so fuck you, Herschel Walker, and your gay son's very annoying. I don't care that he's gay, just he's gay and he's very annoying. Emmitt Smith or Jim Langer. Emmitt Smith's arguably one of the 5 greatest running backs of all time. He's the all-time leading rusher. This one's really not a debate. Lynn Swann or Zach Martin. Lynn Swann's heavily overrated. Zach Martin's one of the greatest guards of all time. He has several first-team All-Pros. It's Zach Martin. Terrell Davis or Walter Payton? Terrell Davis has a better peak than Walter Payton, and I'll die on that hill. He has arguably the greatest running back peak of all time. I'd say it's the greatest running back peak of all time if you count playoffs and you count the regular season having 2,000 yards rushing. Walter Payton's peak is damn near Terrell Davis. It's one of the greatest running back seasons of all time, one of the most dominant seasons of all time. You could argue he's the greatest running back of all time because he has 2 times the longevity that Terrell Davis did, so Walter Payton. Matt Ryan or A.J. Green? Now, A.J. Green's prime and peak was really short. Matt Ryan played for a decent enough long time. He won an MVP, took the Falcons to a Super Bowl and several NFC championships. Matt Ryan. Eric Dickerson or Don Maynard? But Eric Dickerson, I think he has the most dominant running back stretch of all time. And if Terrell Davis doesn't have the greatest running back peak season of all time, it's Eric Dickerson having the most rushing yards in a season in NFL history. John Riggins or Saquon Barkley? As an offensive threat, it is Saquon Barkley, but I believe John Riggins has like way more rushing yards than him and rushing touchdowns. This dude was ridiculous. Whoever y'all think Cam Scattaboo is, y'all need to watch some John Riggins. Yeah, look at this. 24 rushing touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns, first team All-Pro, 11,000 rushing yards in total. We're going John Riggins. Leroy Kelly, I know he made a few first team All-Pros, a few 1,000-yard years in the 1950s, but Steve Hutchinson, I think he has 5 or 6 first team All-Pros, one of the greatest offensive linemen ever. Dwight Stevenson or Gene Upshaw? Gene Upshaw, one of the greatest offensive linemen ever again. Gale Sayers or Tim Brown? He made the Hall of Fame in like 5 seasons, but Tim Brown has the longevity and his peak was pretty good. And he's top 10 in most stats, so I'm going to go Tim Brown. Joe Namath or Jimmy Smith? Most overrated player of all time, maybe. He just had hella aura. Jimmy Smith has 12,000 yards and 50-plus touchdowns. I'm taking that over Joe Namath. I'm sorry. Paul Hornung or Brian Westbrook? I think Paul Hornung has an MVP. Yeah, I think he robbed like Jim Brown and he only had 591 yards rushing and Jim Brown had like 1,000 and led the league. But I'm going Brian Westbrook. Pretty sure this is the dude that robbed Jim Brown. Kevin Mulway, Orlando Pace. Orlando Pace is one of the greatest offensive linemen of all time. Hell, he almost won the Heisman as offensive lineman. Trent Williams or Lance Allworth, man. I love me some Trent Williams, but see this white boy right here? He was something else, man. This is ridiculous. This stretch is ridiculous in the 60s. If you see wide receiver stats from the 60s, this is ridiculous. 6 straight first-team All-Pros, 1,200, 1,200, 1,600, 1,300, 1,000. Mike Evans doesn't put up these type of numbers, and we're in a much more pass-happy league, but I'm gonna do it. Like, this white boy was something else, man. Peyton Manning. Terry Bradshaw or Shannon Sharp? Man, just due to recent events and recent Instagram live leaks, we're going to go with Terry Bradshaw. Love you, Unc. Alvin Kamara, Sean Alexander. Alvin Kamara, I believe, is one of the most overrated players ever. But Sean Alexander is the truth. He broke the rushing touchdowns record, and I believe he has an MVP. Christian McCaffrey, Andre Johnson. Christian McCaffrey, as an offensive threat, is better than Andre Johnson, but he can't stay healthy, and Andre Johnson's counting stats are really good. So, Andre Johnson. Tom Brady or Larry Zonka? Shout out Larry Zonka. Drew Pearson or Charlie Joyner? Drew Pearson really started the 88 trend. He's one of the best wide receivers for his time. And, yeah, Drew Pearson. Derrick Henry or Michael Irvin? Shout out Michael Irvin, one of the greatest wide receivers of all time, one of the greatest peaks of all time. But Derrick Henry, in my opinion, he's a top 5 running back ever, and he's the greatest pure runner of the football ever. Him and Adrian Pearson and Eric Dickerson. You can put them in any order you want. But Derrick Henry, being as good for as long as he's been, it's very impressive for a 6'3" running back. We've never seen it before. Derrick Henry. Zeke or Marquise Colston? Zeke Elliott led the league in rushing twice. I'm going with Zeke. Jim Otto or Tony Boselli? I think Jim Otto made like a stupid amount of first-team All-Pros. 10 or something. I think he has the second ever, so we're going Jim Otto. Josh Allen or Cliff Branch? Yeah, Josh Allen. Cooper Kupp or Lane Johnson? Cooper Kupp, he has probably the greatest wide receiver season of all time, winning Super Bowl MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, and the Triple Crown. But man, he can't seem to stay healthy at all, and Puka Nacua really took his job, and Lane Johnson been the 1 or 2 best tackle in the league for the last, I don't know, decade or so, so we're going Lane Johnson here. Shout out Cooper Kupp, though. That's sad that I can't put him above Lane Johnson. Frank Gore or Brandon Marshall? Brandon Marshall's a very underrated receiver, but Frank Gore's number 3 all-time in rushing. Enough said. Joe Burrow or Steve Smith Sr.? This is stupid, because I think it will be Joe Burrow. Steve Smith has like, what, 8 1,000-yard seasons and a Triple Crown under his head. I'm leaning towards Steve Smith Sr. if I'm being honest. And not to mention, he played with absolute quarterback hell as well. I'm going to lean towards Steve Smith Sr. Joe Burrow just hasn't played long enough. Give it like 3 more seasons, maybe. Tony Jurgensen or Warren Moon? We're going Warren Moon, but this dude's probably like 35 in this photo. I know for a fact he retired before the age of 40, or he would be dead, but god damn, bro. Warren Moon. John Hanna or Walter Jones, bro. Two of the greatest offensive linemen of all time. Walter Jones is one of the greatest offensive linemen of all time. I think he has like 7 first-team All-Pros or something like that. But John Hanna, man, maybe the greatest guard of all time. He was really the greatest Patriots player before Tom Brady. I'd have a number 2 greatest Patriot player of all time. If you're an offensive lineman, watch some John Hanna highlights. Rosie Brown. This looks like the 1910s. We're going with Damani Dawson. Ricky Williams or Joe Thomas? Joe Thomas. Ron Mix or Michael Vick? I love me some Mike Vick. Ron Mix made like, what, 7 first-team All-Pros? I think we're going to have to go with him, but shout out Mike Vick. We're picking Mike Vick for the culture. Fuck all that. Drew Brees or Franco Harris? Franco Harris probably has the greatest afro of all time and sideburns. You can just tell what era this dude's from, 1970s. I bet he was pulling hose like the jive turkey he was, but we're going Drew Brees. Art Shell or Larry Allen? Larry Allen's quite literally, in my opinion, the greatest guard of all time. Mick Tinglehoff. Why are we naming niggas Mick Tinglehoff? But anywho, it's Adrian Peterson. Crazy Legs Hirsch. Nigga, what are these names in the 1920s? Anywho, it was Antonio Gate. Frank Gifford. Shout out Frank Gifford. My mom met ya. Or Harold Carmichael. We're going Frank Gifford. I believe he's a Hall of Famer and he has pretty good stats adjusted for era. Bobby Lane or LaShawn McCoy. We're going LaShawn McCoy. Tony Gonzalez or Jim Trier. Tony Gonzalez, in my opinion, the greatest tight end of all time. Tommy McDonald or Tony Dorsett. We're going Tony Dorsett, top 15 running back ever. Terrell Owens or Chad Ochocinco, basically the same person. Both bald, both kind of handsome. Terrell Owens. Joe Flacco or Willie Rowe. Joe Flacco's heavily overrated, even though he was slinging that pill like a mad motherfucker last week. We're going Willie Rowe. Jonathan Ogden or Nick Mangold, one of the greatest tackles of all time. We're going Jonathan Ogden. Shout out Nick Mangold. Fred Blinkenkoff or Jimmy Graham. I'm going Jimmy Graham. His peak was actually kind of insane. O.J. Simpson or Dez Bryant. I mean, he murdered people. He had 2,000 yards in 14 games and has arguably the greatest running back season of all time in 1974. He also murdered people, though, but yeah, we're going O.J. Donald Driver or Aaron Rodgers. This is silly. Aaron Rodgers. Barry Sanders, Clem Portis. In my opinion, probably the greatest running back of all time. I go back and forth between Jim Brown, Walter Payton, and Barry all the time, but we're going Barry Sanders. Eli Manning or Earl Campbell. Earl Campbell is the greatest power back to ever live. Eli Manning is a fucking fraud. The only stat he led the league in was interceptions. Earl Campbell. Rice or LT? Terrible draw for LT. One of the 10 greatest running backs of all time. The best running back of the 21st century, really. Him and Adrian Peterson, but Jerry Rice is the greatest wide receiver of all time. It's Jerry Rice. Dan Fouts or Tyron Smith. Shout out Dan Fouts, one of the most underrated quarterbacks of all time. He really is Phillip Rivers, though. Like, his career arc is literally Phillip Rivers. Tyron Smith is one of the best left tackles I've ever seen personally. He couldn't really stay healthy, but we're going with Dan Fouts. Dan Marino or Paul Warfield? Dan Marino, 1984. Jim Parker or Mike Ditka? We're going Mike Ditka because every offensive lineman from the 40s, 50s, 20s, 30s are hitting this shit. What is this shit? Steve Hutchinson, Norm Van Brocklin. Oh, we're in a new round. I hear about Norm Van Brocklin a lot, but I know more about Steve Hutchinson, and he made a bunch of first-team All-Pros, and he's one of the greatest offensive linemen ever, Steve Hutch. Tim Brown or Greg Olson? Tim Brown. Greg Olson, G-Reg with the third fucking leg. Type of gritty worker you would like to date your daughter as long as he stays off the 7th floor. Tim Brown. Pretty easy. Eric Dickerson or Thurman Thomas. Now, if I'm being honest, I don't remember sending Thurman Thomas through to the 2nd round. That's interesting. I believe Eric Dickerson has more rushing yards, had better longevity, and his peak seasons were just so fucking dominant, it's not really too close. But this is like kind of a decent debate. Eric Dickerson. Fran Tarkenton or Otto Graham. I believe Otto Graham just won a fuck ton of NFL championships, but as an individual player, I'm giving it to Fran Tarkenton. Just more dynamic, and you could drop him in any era. He's really Russell Wilson before Russell Wilson. Rob Gronkowski or Marshall Yonda. Love me some Marshall Yonda, but Rob Gronkowski is arguably the greatest tight end ever. Sterling Sharp or Will Shields. Will Shields. I believe Will Shields had a crazy longevity. He was probably the best guard in the league for a while. Sterling Sharp just didn't have the longevity. He probably had a better peak. And I'm taking longevity, so I'm going Will Shields. DeAndre Hopkins or Lane Johnson. I kind of value wide receivers more than offensive linemen, but objectively speaking, he's been more consistent throughout his career. I think I'm leaning towards DeAndre Hopkins. Tony Dorsett or Willie Rowe. I'm taking Tony Dorsett here just because how dominant he was for those 70s Cowboys, and he was really the best player on that team. Yeah, Tony Dorsett. Jerry Rice or LaShawn McCoy. Shout out LaShawn McCoy, but again, Jerry Rice is quite literally the greatest receiver of all time. And it's at the point he's not even competing with wide receivers anymore. He's competing with Tom Brady and Lawrence Taylor and Reggie White for the greatest players of all time. So, Jerry Rice, not close. Sid Luckman or Derrick Henry. Sid Luckman, you're great for your era, but you guys will lynch Derrick Henry for what he would do to you guys. Not even gonna lie. Jim Kelly or Brian Westbrook. Shout out Brian Westbrook, one of the most dynamic running backs. He was very before his time, but Jim Kelly, he's quarterback, 4 straight Super Bowls. He lost everyone, but still. John Elway or Kurt Warner. At his peak, Kurt Warner's better. I don't give a shit. At his peak, he had a better impact, but John Elway was somehow a starting quarterback for all of his career, which was 15 plus years. He won 2 Super Bowls, won an MVP. You kind of just gotta lean towards John Elway, even though I believe he had more impact in his prime and peak. Kurt Warner did, but John Elway just has the counting stats and he just played longer. Go fuck yourself, John Elway. I'll smack the mongoose out of your face. Raymond Berry or Jim Otto. Raymond Berry, you're great for your time, but 10 first-team All-Pros or something ridiculous like that. That's unprecedented. Shout out Jim Otto. Lamar or Wyatt Tittle. This isn't close, Lamar. Boomer Esiason or Reggie Wayne. I know you have an MVP, but I believe Reggie Wayne is just the better offensive player. Terrell Owens or Marquise Pouncey. Terrell Owens, second greatest receiver ever. Larry Fitzgerald or Phillip Rivers. Who compares these two, bro? Why did I give myself the job of comparing these two? So would I rather be a quarterback with a bunch of touchdown passes, 0 Super Bowls, and a bunch of kids? Or Larry Fitzgerald? I'm taking Larry Fitzgerald. Tony G or Lance Allworth. Shout out Lance Allworth, but this dude has like 15,000 receiving yards as a tight end. Greatest tight end ever. Jamar Chase or Jason Kelce? Fuck a duck, because Jamar Chase as an offensive player, if you had me actually pick a player on my team, I'm choosing Jamar Chase 9 out of 10 times. He just won the Triple Crown, but Jason Kelce did play longer so far, and he has a bunch of first-team All-Pros. I think he's the greatest center ever, so we're going Jason Kelce. Aaron Rodgers, Antonio Brown. CTE Warrior loses to Psychedelic Warrior here. Jim Brown, Antonio Gates. Jim Brown. Stats are ridiculous. 1 MVP as a rookie, like I said. I believe he won 3 MVPs in total and led the league in rushing every year he played. Jim Brown. Dan Marino, Andre Reed. Dan Marino. Julio Jones or Ron Yeri. Julio. Joe Thomas or Orlando Pace. I think Joe Thomas has more first-team All-Pros than Orlando Pace, I'm pretty sure. I'm going to go Joe Thomas. Shout out Orlando Pace, though. Very dominant. Drew Brees or Michael Vick. For the culture, I'd pick Michael Vick, but if we're being objective, it's not close. It's Drew Brees. Zeke Elliott, Don Hudson. Zeke Elliott's definitely more skillful, has more athleticism, but stats are fucking ridiculous for Don Hudson. Doesn't look like he's inverting his fucking knee right here. Like, Jesus Christ. Don Hudson. Terry Bradshaw or Sean Alexander. Terry Bradshaw. Sean Alexander wasn't like that, like Terry Bradshaw was. Not saying Terry Bradshaw was even like that, though. Joe Montana or Stephon Diggs. Again, probably the greatest per-throw Super Bowl quarterback ever. He has the greatest playoff run ever. He has the second greatest Super Bowl performance ever. He has 2 or 3 Super Bowl MVPs. Yeah, you get it. Joe Montana. Steve Young, Damani Dawson. Steve Young. Priest Holmes, Kellen Winslow. I'm going to say for his era, Kellen Winslow was probably the better offensive player, but man, Priest Holmes was ridiculous. Hold on. This fucking stretch right here, man. 1,555 yards, 8 touchdowns, 1,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, 1,400 yards, and 27, man. I'm going to pick Kellen Winslow just because he's in the Hall of Fame and he was more dominant in his era. Matthew Stafford or Marshawn Lynch. Matthew Stafford, you're a Hall of Famer. Adrian Peterson, Jerome Bettis, greatest pure runner of all time, 2,000 yards, the last non-quarterback to win MVP. You know what it is. Adrian Peterson. Jamal Charles or Zach Martin. We're taking Zach Martin. He has like 7 first-team All-Pros. Ridiculous. Jimmy Graham or Larry Allen. Larry Allen's the greatest guard of all time. O.J. Simpson, Jim Ringo, 1974. O.J. goes crazy. Roger Staubach and Mike Ditka. We're taking Roger. He won 2 Super Bowls and was arguably the best player on those teams. George Kittle, Jonathan Ogden. I love Kittle. He's probably my favorite player in the league, but we're going Jonathan Ogden. Josh Allen or Matt Ryan. Both have an MVP, but Josh Allen hasn't went to a Super Bowl, bro. But at his peak, it's really Josh Allen has better peak years than Matt Ryan, even though I'd argue his MVP season's better than his, but like Josh Allen has better non-MVP seasons than Matt Ryan and is more consistent, but he's been to a Super Bowl, and like Josh Allen, they both have the same amount of MVPs. He has 1 more first-team All-Pro. I'm going Matt Ryan. This might be a hot take. Y'all might be mad. I'm going Matt Ryan. Tom Brady or Anquan Bolden, not a question. Ben Roethlisberger or Mike Webster. Fuck this rapist. Dan Fouts or Ken Anderson. What the fuck? We're going to actually have to look at their stats for this because I think of them almost like the same people, if I'm being honest. I think Ken Anderson threw a fuck ton of picks, though. Yeah. 197 to 160 picks. I believe it's Dan Fouts, probably. Holy shit! He threw a bunch of 242 picks. Oh shit, you're not making this easy, dude. Oh my god. I'd say just because of volume, it's Dan Fouts, but shit. Are we serious? It really might be Ken Anderson, though. Like, it legit might be Ken Anderson because you see 21-11, 19-14, 10 to 22. Jesus Christ. Let's just go Dan Fouts. Johnny U or Walter Payton. Johnny Unitas is one of the 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time. But with that being said, there's positional bias even with me, but Walter Payton's arguably the greatest running back of all time. Sweetness was something else. He has an MVP. He won a Super Bowl. He was the best player on that Super Bowl winning team, even though it had the 85 Bears defense. He retired the all-time lead rusher. You gotta go Walter Payton. I'm sorry, Johnny U. That's a shitty draw. Warren Moon or Gary Zimmerman. I don't know you too much, so we're going to Warren Moon. This one's kind of ridiculous because Packers legends, they both have kind of short primes, but Devontae Adams is probably going to have another 1,000-yard year. Amon Green, sadly, his career was cut short. He did have ridiculous stats, though, but Devontae Adams. Steven Jackson, Gene Upshaw. Randall McDaniel or Jimbo Cover? I think Randall McDaniel had like a ridiculous amount of first-team All-Pros. We're going him. Bobby Mitchell, Bruce Matthews is one of the 10 greatest linemen ever. Chris Johnson or Isaac Bruce. I don't remember selecting Chris Johnson. I think this is kind of random, but we're going Isaac Bruce here, so no harm, no foul. Patrick Mahomes or Earl Campbell. Well, he has probably the greatest power back peak of all time in the regular season, almost having 2,000 yards rushing. This isn't close. Marvin Harrison or Anthony Munoz. Shitty draw for Marvin Harrison because this is the greatest offensive lineman to ever play the game of football. Todd Gurley or Calvin Johnson. Peyton Manning, Chris Carter, Peyton. Steve Largent, John Hanna. Sorry, Steve Largent, I understand. Basically the Jerry Rice of your era, but we're going John Hanna, one of the greatest guards of all time. Roger Craig, Justin Jefferson. We're going peak for peak. It's definitely Justin Jefferson. Steve McNair, Andre Johnson. Steve McNair won an MVP. He's in the Hall of Fame, though. I love me some Steve McNair, but I'm going Andre Johnson. Frank Gifford, Jimmy Smith. Shout out Frank Gifford. I think if we adjust per era, it really is Frank Gifford, if I'm being honest. Brett Favre or Len Dawson. Shout out Len Dawson, one of the greatest Chiefs players of all time, but Brett Favre counting stats and peak, 3 MVPs in a row, you know what it is. Frank Gore, Ray Rice, 3rd all-time rushing. Barry Sanders, Drew Pearson, Barry Sanders. Russell Wilson, John Riggins, Russell Wilson. Steve Smith, Forrest Gregg. Just because I know my viewers know Steve Smith better and I know Steve Smith better, we're going Steve Smith. Dak Prescott, Marshall Faulk. This isn't close, Marshall Faulk. Cam Newton, Marcus Allen. It's Marcus Allen, but man, he shouldn't make it this far. Shout out Marcus Allen, though. Emmitt Smith, Randy Moss. Woo! As a greater offensive threat that you had to scheme against, it's definitely Randy Moss, right? I believe you'd rather go against Emmitt Smith, even though look at these. Look at this peak. Do I go Randy Moss here? If we're going against people who don't want to scheme against, it would be like Calvin Johnson winning, and that just doesn't make sense. You gotta throw in stats, but these stats are also ridiculous. You gotta throw in stats. You gotta throw in the accolades, and Emmitt Smith has more first-team All-Pros in a league that had Barry Sanders in it. We're gonna have to go Emmitt Smith, but this is a 50-50. Don Hudson or Julio Jones. Fuck Don Hudson. He played without black people. Most of the league was in World War II. Bruce Matthews or Dan Fouts. Bruce Matthews. Oh, this is the start of a new round, by the way. I didn't even notice that. I didn't even pay attention. Russell Wilson or Steve Hutchinson. I value linemen really highly. Jim Otto or Matt Ryan. Jim Otto, like I said, a bunch of first-team All-Pros. As a player, it's probably Matt Ryan, but if we go accolades, it's definitely Jim Otto. I'm going with him. Drew Brees or Lamar Jackson. It's Drew Brees. It's Drew Brees. Barry Sanders, Jim Kelly, not close to Barry Sanders. Frank Gifford, Zach Martin. I don't think you should be going to this far, so we're going Zach Martin. Brett Favre or Jim Brown. This isn't too close. Yeah, he won 3 straight MVPs, but Jim Brown has 3 MVPs, and he led the league in rushing every year. Like I said, Jim Brown. Dan Marino, Eric Dickerson. This is stupid. This is silly. Why would you pick these two? This hurts my head. Since he's a quarterback in that 1984 season, might be the greatest quarterback season of all time. To this day, we're going Dan Marino, even though Eric Dickerson, damn, that's a shitty draw. Man, this sucks because Roger Staubach or Matthew Stafford's about to go farther than Eric Dickerson, you know? Yeah, I'm going Stafford. I'm sorry. Aaron Rodgers, Reggie Wayne. Reggie Wayne's one of the 15 greatest receivers of all time, but Aaron Rodgers top 5. John Elway, Kellen Winslow. There's no reason John Elway should go this far, but fuck it. John Elway. Fuck you. Marcus Allen, Will Shields. Marcus Allen. Anthony Munoz, Jonathan Ogden. You could argue this is 2 greatest offensive linemen of all time, really. There's one that's the greatest. That's Anthony Munoz. Terry Bradshaw, John Hanna. This is probably who I have as the 2nd greatest offensive lineman ever, so we're going John Hanna. Adrian Peterson or Isaac Bruce. Isaac Bruce has ridiculous stats. One of 4 people to have that, but Adrian Peterson's the greatest pure runner ever, and he peaked a lot higher, and he's top 5 in rushing yards. OJ Randall McDaniel. Shout out the murderer. Steve Young or Tony Dorsett. We're going Steve Young. He was more impactful offensively and has 2 MVPs and a Super Bowl MVP. Peyton Manning, Gene Upshaw, Peyton Manning. Calvin Johnson or Tim Brown. Calvin Johnson, more dominant. Fitz or Steve Smith. Shout out Steve Smith for making this far. I like that he did, but we're going Larry Fitzgerald. Tom Brady. Rob Gronkowski or Jason Kelce. Ain't that about a bitch. It's definitely Gronk, even though he has less, first-team All-Pros, but just when he was playing the game, man, he was really ridiculous. Rob Gronkowski. Warren Moon or Derrick Henry. Warren Moon's great. Derrick Henry's just so stupidly dominant. It's dumb. Why'd you make this the one? Because this is unfair. There's no reason John Elway should be continuing and Joe Montana can't. This is stupid. This could be literally the final round. This is actually stupid. But yes, it's Jerry Rice. Jay Jettas or Larry Allen. I'm still pissed about last round because what the fuck are we doing, bro? I'm gonna Swiss cheese the creator of this. Larry Allen. Walter Payton, Mike Webster, Walter Payton. Frank Gore, Joe Thomas. Frank Gore's third all-time in rushing. I'm glad he made it this far. Like I said, my favorite player of all time, but it's Joe Thomas. Emmitt Smith, Tony G. Tony Gonzalez is the greatest tight end of all time. I gotta go Emmitt Smith. I wanted to go Tony G, but I gotta go Emmitt. Andre Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, two great Houston Texans, but I believe Andre Johnson has the better counting stats, and he played with worse quarterbacks, so we're going Andre Johnson. Terrell Owens, Fran Tarkenton, Terrell Owens. Julio Jones, Rob Gronkowski. This is the start of a new round, and this is actually fucking stupid. I gotta go Gronk. Jim Brown, Larry Allen. This one's also kind of stupid, but we're going Jim Brown. Adrian Peterson or Calvin Johnson. I value Calvin Johnson a lot more because he's a wide receiver, but the fact this dude is top 5 in rushing all time, and he has an MVP, and he rushed for 2,000 yards, and he was considered the best running back for all of the 2010s, I gotta put him above Calvin Johnson. This one is crazy. Barry Sanders, man. I'm going into stats for this. 15,269 yards rushing in 10 years. 1,400, 1,300, 1,500, 1,300, 1,100, 1,800, 1,500, 1,500, 2,491, then fucking retired. But Jerry, man. Jerry Rice is just so head and goddamn heels above the competition. It's not funny. Look at this stretch. Look at this stretch. In this 10-year stretch, Rice had 15,450 yards and 151 receiving touchdowns. Now let's look at who people consider the second greatest wide receiver, want to argue is the best. In that 10-year stretch, Rice had 5 less touchdowns than Randy Moss had in his career. He had more receiving yards, and he had almost 3 times the amount of first-team All-Pros. Love Barry, but it's Rice. Dan Marino or Andre Johnson, Dan Marino. Derrick Henry or Joe Thomas, Joe Thomas. Emmitt Smith or Marcus Allen. It's Emmitt Smith. Fuck Marcus Allen. Larry Fitzgerald or O.J. Simpson. This is actually harder than you'd think, but you are a serial killer and you're a nice dude. Steve Young or Zach Martin, Steve Young. John Elway or Jim Otto. Get this fucker off my screen, Jim Otto. Bruce Matthews or Steve Hutchinson. I believe Bruce Matthews is the better offensive lineman than Steve Hutchinson, so I'm going Bruce Matthews. Walter Payton or Terrell Owens. Terrell Owens, in my opinion, is the second greatest receiver of all time, but I'm taking Walter Payton. Patrick Mahomes or Peyton Manning. You guys aren't going to like this, but I'm going Patrick Mahomes. But hear me out, hear me out. Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs has more passing touchdowns than Peyton Manning, with less interceptions, by the way. He's been to more Super Bowls at 5. He's won more Super Bowls. He has the second most Super Bowl MVPs of all time, which is more than Peyton Manning, by the way. He has 3 Super Bowl MVPs. He has 2 MVPs, 2 first-team All-Pros. While he might not be as regular season dominant, which he'll probably catch up to him because his regular season stats are on par with a prime Peyton Manning, and he's leading the league in MVP votes. He might get his 3rd this year. If we go playoff stats, if we go clutch performances, if we go Super Bowls, if we go who do you want in the biggest moment of the game, and if we go from a pure offensive talent point, we're giving it to Patrick Mahomes. Simply put, he's clutcher, he's the better playoff performer and Super Bowl performer, and he just wins more. He plays more winning football. You're not going to like it. None of you guys are, but it's Patrick Mahomes. Sorry. Matthew Stafford, John Hanna, John Hanna. Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. This isn't close for me. Tom Brady. Drew Brees or Anthony Munoz. Drew Brees. Shout out Drew Brees. I love me some Drew Brees, but Anthony Munoz, greatest offensive lineman ever. I'll say it till the end of this video. Jim Brown or Larry Fitzgerald. This is a new round, by the way. Round of 16. Jim Brown or Larry Fitzgerald. I'm going Jim Brown. Confident. Walter Payton or Rob Gronkowski. It's definitely Walter Payton. Jerry Rice or Bruce Matthews. Jerry Rice. Dan Marino or Tom Brady. Tom Brady. Patrick Mahomes, John Hanna, Patrick Mahomes. Steve Young or Emmitt Smith. As an offensive player, Steve Young is better than Emmitt Smith. When it comes to MVPs, when it comes to Super Bowl performances, MVPs, playoff performances, Steve Young is better than Emmitt Smith. And fuck the Cowboys. Adrian Peterson or Jim Otto. Jim Otto has 10 first-team All-Pros, but if I'm being honest, I might take Adrian Peterson over Jim Otto. Taking Adrian Peterson, sorry. Anthony Munoz or Joe Thomas. Yeah, these might be the 2 greatest offensive linemen of all time. I said that like 3 times already, but I'm going Anthony Munoz. New round. Jerry Rice or Steve Young, not too close. Jerry Rice. Adrian Peterson, Anthony Munoz, not close. Anthony Munoz. Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady. I made a video about this. Patrick Mahomes through his first 8 years is better than Tom Brady through his first 8 years. He's more talented than Tom Brady. He's better in the playoffs than Tom Brady really ever was in his entire career. He's better in the Super Bowl. He has more Super Bowl MVPs than he had in his first 8 years. But Tom Brady played more than 8 years. He won 4 more Super Bowls. He won 3 more league MVPs. So objectively, It's Tom Brady. Walter Payton or Jim Brown? I love me some Walter Payton. Jim Brown's just ridiculous, man. Hold on, let me give you guys his stats. Look at this. His first year in the NFL, he led the league in rushing, 9 touchdowns. He won MVP. His second year, he won MVP. Third year, he placed third in the MVP vote. And then he led the league in rushing his first 3 years. His fourth year, he led the league in rushing. Fifth year, led the league in rushing. Sixth year, where he led the league in rushing, lost MVP to a dude that rushed for 597 yards. Doesn't make sense. Broke the rushing yards record in a season. And then he kept leading the league in rushing until he retired with arguably his best season, having 1,500 yards and 17 touchdowns. Winning MVP in his final season and hanging it up. Yes, Walter Payton was great, but Jim Brown, he really was on another level from everybody else in the NFL at the time, and he could play in any era. Jim Brown. New round, by the way. Jim Brown or Anthony Munoz. Son of a bitch. I value a left tackle more than a running back. He has like 10 or 11 first-team All-Pros. This is really hard for me. It's actually really close. It could go one way or another. I'm gonna go Jim Brown. Tom Brady or Jerry Rice? I could sit here for another fucking hour. These are quite literally the 2 greatest players in football history. Tom Brady, when it comes to Super Bowls, he got it. He's not head and heels above the competition that Jerry Rice is, man. Jerry Rice, as a playoff performer, is arguably the greatest playoff performer of all time, regardless of position, too. And these stats are just so stupid. At the age of 39 and 40, he has back-to-back 1,000-yard years, but Tom Brady, man, 40 touchdowns, 43 touchdowns, 25 touchdowns, and 9. You see, my thing is about Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time. If you say he's the greatest player of all time, that's fine. He only has 3 first-team All-Pros. There was other people dominant at his position, more dominant than him during his literal era of dominance. I think he's the greatest quarterback of all time. But if we're talking about dominating the offensive side of the football, you are not going to like me. But I'm picking Jerry Rice. And then Jim Brown, Jerry Rice. Picking Jerry Rice. Well, now that I made a bunch of enemies out of you all, like, comment, subscribe, tell me what I did wrong. I know the top comment what I'm about to do wrong, but anywho, I like making this video. Let me know if y'all want more of this. I'll catch y'all boys later. Peace.